We're excited to talk to you about a topic that I think we all would agree is a very hot topic right now, and that is how to make it more attractive for clinical therapists to want to remain clinical therapists. They have a lot of options now, more than they have really at any point in the history of our profession. So what we need to do as an industry is make it attractive for clinical therapists to want to be clinical therapists. It's no surprise that at this point, as we all know, the demand for therapy services is at an all-time high. 20 years ago, wait lists for physical therapy practices were really not a thing. Today, just about every practice across the country has a wait list, and in many cases, the ability to monitor wait lists is actually being automated because it's so popular and so common. At the same time, supply of physical therapists is at an all-time low. We have less physical therapists treating patients than we have in decades. 2 out of every therapists that are licensed in the United States are not treating patients, are not actually putting hands on patients. So we know we need to do something different. We know the solution is not increasing salaries across the board, increasing perks for therapists, increasing the size of sign-on bonuses. How do we know that's not the case? Because many of us are already doing that, and yet we still see therapists changing jobs roughly 18 months, even in the midst of doing all of those things. So what is the solution? That's what we're going to be talking about today. The solution is not one solution. From what we've seen in the data we have, the solution is multiple solutions. The idea of offering multiple plans from which therapists can choose is much more statistically likely to cause a therapist to want to accept your offer or stay with the organization over a long period of time. So we're going to talk about some solutions today. And so to do that, I have 2 friends and colleagues that have presented with me before, both of whom have gone down this road, and they're going to be giving you specific information in just a few minutes about what they have tried and what has and has not worked at their practices. In addition to that, we have a handout that we'll make available to all of you at the conclusion of this session that is going to give you a couple of things. Number one, it's going to give you objective data that both Jason and Larissa have compiled at their practice, pre-introduction of these types of compensation models and post-introduction, and what happened objectively in their practice and what the difference actually was. The second thing we'll do is offer on the handout, a QR code that you can scan that will bring you directly to a new section of our website that we just launched a few days ago that includes staff therapist testimonials from across the country talking about their experience with this approach to compensation. And that's one of the things that we hear most often as a concern about this approach. How will my therapists respond if I change the approach to compensation? Will they like it? Will they not like it? Will they stay with us as a result? Will they leave as a result? Rather than me telling you my perception of that, we want you to hear it directly from the staff therapists who are experiencing it. So that's what we'll be doing today. So by way of introduction, let's do some introductions. Larissa, if you can start, just let everybody know your background and when you actually started the process of changing your approach to compensation.
Okay. Hi, my name is Larissa Schatz. I'm the VP of Company Operations at Spooner Physical Therapy. We are based out of Phoenix, Arizona, and then we have a couple locations in the Dallas-Fort Worth location as well. We rolled out a variable compensation model in 2021. We had traditional salary models plus bonus. We had rolled out our own revenue sharing type model. And then we partnered with Jason in 2021 to roll out prompt compensation. And we haven't looked back since. So I'm excited to share more of our journey along the way.
Hey everybody, I'm Jason Laub. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Mountainland Physical Therapy, and we are in Utah, Idaho, and Montana. We started a pilot program using prompt compensation in 2019, and then we rolled it out across the whole company in 2020, and we're still developing the program today.
Okay, thank you both. Let me start off by giving everybody just a few things to think about. When you think about actually adjusting your approach to compensation, we'll give you a few things that we've seen across the country that tend to work. And then we're going to give Jason and Larissa an opportunity to give you their personal experience. Number one, as I mentioned earlier, offering choices. Statistically, you're more likely to have a therapist accept your offer or stay with you if you're giving them more than one option. If you think of a new grad therapist who comes to you and says, I'd like to make $95,000 as a new grad therapist, and in your mind you're thinking, I wanted to offer them $80,000. Now what do I do? If I give them that offer and they're making $95,000, that could cut dramatically into our margin, perhaps even erode our margin. So if we allow that, then we have the spot filled, the staffing need is solved, but now we have an issue on the productivity and the profitability side. Conversely, if we don't give them that offer, if we don't allow them to earn what they're asking for, we haven't filled that spot. We don't know how long it will be until we get another candidate. As we know, these days, it could be weeks, it could be months, even longer. We're seeing some practices that have ads posted that are not being responded to for 6 months, 7 months, 8 months. So it's a challenge. With this approach, with multiple options, multiple plans available, that new grad that says, I'd like to make $95,000, rather than that being a yes, we can offer that, or no, I'm sorry, we can't, now you have another solution. You'd like to make $95,000? Great. Let's show you the path to get there. We have 3 plans that will give you a path to $95,000 or past $95,000, and we'll give you every tool and resource that we can to help you have it, whatever level of success you would like to have. So that's principle number 1. Principle number 2 is transparency. Your employees, if you're going to offer multiple plans, have to know what their pay will be depending on the plan they select and have the ability to compare that. The additional thing that we need to consider is plan selection over time. If they choose a plan, they need to have the ability to change that plan. We know that 75% of practicing therapists in the US right now are under the age of 37. So if we think about that point in life, our circumstances are changing very quickly. One year we might have graduated from PT school and have 4 roommates. The year after that, we might go out on our own and have no roommates. Then maybe we want to buy a house or whatever that might be. So our circumstances are changing. One of the primary reasons therapists change jobs is to get a different circumstance. But what if you could offer a different circumstance, a different pay structure within the 4 walls of your company? You had that opportunity to hang on to that provider without them having to leave your company to get a different structure. So just some things to think about, but I want you to hear it directly from Jason and Larissa. So I'm going to pose some questions and then let them respond to that. Here's the first question to the two of you. Why did you initially consider a compensation model overhaul, and what challenges were you trying to solve? Let's start with you, Larissa.
Our why really started with our therapists taking ownership of their earning potential and really being invested in their financial success. So many times our therapists come to us saying like, I want to make more money, or I want to make $95,000. How do I get there? And a lot of times it runs down to like, you have to see more visits, right? Or we have to improve your billing behaviors, but that transparency is not always available to them. And we feel with like the performance pay model, it allowed our therapists that full transparency, but it allowed them to really be in control of their earning potential because we gave them options. If they wanted to take one plan, we have 3 different plans that they can choose from. And so, if they really are that risk taker and they are betting on themselves to increase their value and their worth, and they are ready to put in the time, then they have the ability to do that. If someone's going through maybe a life situation where they need to scale back a little bit and they maybe need to go on a model that's a little bit less risky, then there's that opportunity for them as well.
Our why was similar to that. We were looking for alignment with our professionals. We wanted our therapists to understand the economics of the profession and be aligned with the company goals and how we see things. And so revamping the compensation allowed us to move that direction. We had tried other compensation models that are, similar, not similar, but that are common in the profession. Things like giving someone a bonus if they hit above a certain number of visit volumes per week, on all the visits above a certain number. And we had tried that. We had seen not a lot of success with that. What we saw with those models was that the people who were already high performers were happy to take home a little more money, and the people that were low performers didn't really seem motivated by that bonus. And so those things didn't really work for us. And so we were looking for something different, and doing kind of a revenue share model through prompt compensation was that thing that was different.
There is a lot of research out there on this topic of bonus models. And I've had the opportunity over the last 10 years that I've been focusing on this to really look through the payroll journals and HR journals to get to the bottom of, do bonus models work or don't they? And it's really very interesting. The vast majority of studies that have been done on traditional bonus models, which has been sort of our traditional approach to compensation in this profession, is that categorically, at best, they don't move the needle on employee behaviors. At worst, they actually backfire. They actually demotivate therapists. So one of the things that we strongly recommend, if we're going to introduce new compensation models, is that those models are not bonus models. They are not incentivizing a therapist to do more. It's really important that we distinguish between a typical bonus structure and a variable compensation model. Now, the other thing I want to say about this is, in the past, we would typically recommend that practices move away entirely from typical salary models and attempt to adopt variable compensation models. And what we've found is that that's not necessary to do that. It's not necessary to force your therapist to make that change. They will make the change on their own over time, as long as they're armed with the appropriate data. So one of the things that we hear about a lot is, I'm afraid to roll this out because I can't lose any therapists. The antidote to that concern is, leave your salary model on the table. Don't take it away. There's no need to take it away. But then introduce other models that give them the opportunity to see what their life would look like with those different models, and let them make the change over time. The data that we have, if we were to look at the three most popular models, would be a salary model, and then let's say a 90-10 model, and then a 70-30 model. If we're playing with the base and the performance pay, 85% of therapists initially will choose the most conservative model that you put in front of them. Is anybody surprised by that? I don't think so. Staff therapists are typically not risk-tolerant individuals. We tend to be risk-averse. But fast forward 12 months, more than 50% of those therapists that initially chose the salary model will walk themselves over to one of these other models, where they're willing to shoulder some of the financial burden and to sort of bet on themselves rather than asking the company to do it. So there's no need to force them to do that. They'll get there on their own as long as we give them the data, and eventually they'll make that selection themselves. That's a much better, more effective approach than ripping the Band-Aid off initially and asking those therapists to take that ride with you. So I just wanted to make that comment. Next question for the two of you. How would you summarize the results of the change that you made, and did it accomplish what you hoped it would? Jason, let's start with you on this one.
So there's two main results we found with this. One was that we found our clinic directors saying that they loved having people in their clinic that was on this model, because those therapists understood the economics of the profession better. They were, more engaged. They were more willing to kind of flex with the needs of the clinic. And then from the individuals that were actually on the model, from the staff therapists, we heard that they, felt more empowered, that they felt more in control of their schedule, of their compensation, that they could, kind of adjust accordingly. A lot of them said that initially there was some stress related to that they kind of felt like this pressure to grind, and then as they worked through that and kind of figured out that they could find balance and still be happy with their compensation, then they felt better about it. And then, we also saw a lot of change in specific metrics. Don, do you want to talk about those now, or do you want to?
Larissa, why don't you share, generally speaking, and then we'll circle back to actual metrics.
Okay. Yeah, similar to kind of what Jason had already said, but a couple of areas that we definitely saw improvement on was even our patient experience. Our therapists were more invested in making sure that their patients were finishing out their plan of care. So when it came to cancels and no-shows and making sure that those patients were followed up with, those plan of cares were fulfilled. And so that resulted in our visit per new patient trending in the upward direction, which was awesome. In addition, those patients had a better outcome. And so our patient experience, our NPS score continues to rise year over year. And I really think those are tied because our therapists are more invested in making sure that those clinic cares are being completed.
Okay, thank you. So let's talk some numbers now, objective results. What specific metrics were positively influenced as a result of this change?
So one of our goals going into this was to give our therapists an ability to raise their compensation as long as it was in alignment with the company. And we saw that impact right away. Since we started in 2019, our therapists that are on this plan are on average making 25% more than their counterparts, which is a substantial difference. And we, at the same time, we also saw some of their performance KPIs improve. So we saw productivity increase with these therapists and their attendance rate get better and their payment per visit improve because they were more engaged with, how to bill for strong reimbursement. And we also saw outcomes go up in this group. So we're monitoring, quality measures, monitoring for compliance issues, and didn't see any rise in compliance issues in this group and saw improved outcomes in this group compared to their counterparts. So those are the main things that we've tracked all along the way.
When you guys get the handout, you'll see our two biggest KPIs that we saw trends were the visits per new patient, like I already spoke to, as far as the amount of visits that our therapists were seeing per patient that they were evaluating. And that went from right below 10 visits per new patient and well above 12 visits per new patient. In addition, we saw our revenue per visit rise by $6 within that first year. So we rolled it out in 2021. And then in 2022, our revenue per visit had jumped significantly because our therapists were really invested in understanding their billing behaviors when it came to the certain payer mix that they had on their schedule. And so they were being more strategic in making sure that they were making better decisions on the codes that they were using and justifying for those codes.
Okay, thank you both. And when you get the handout, you'll see some specific metrics that we put together for you. So that brings us to the next question. Very few practice owners that I've spoken with in the last 10 years that I've been focusing on this concept of compensation would say we don't need to make a change as an industry. Just about every practice owner I've spoken with agrees we need to make a change. We need to do something differently. What we're doing is not working. So the question is not, do we need to do something differently? The question is, what exactly should we do differently? So let's tackle that now. Here's the next question for the two of you, Jason and Larissa. What advice would you give to another company that is considering a comp structure overhaul, regardless of what the overhaul is, but trying something different, but is concerned about how the therapists, their employees, their clinicians will feel about the change? Larissa, let's start with you.
I'll start. I think my biggest words of advice is transparency. Like if you're already worried or concerned how they're going to feel, the more transparent you are with them, the better they're going to trust you, the more they're going to be bought into the entire change or rollout. And so that really is transparency with the data, the numbers, and their performance, and where their performance lines up with their colleagues or where their performance lines up in the company. We've always been transparent with our KPIs and our data from a clinic level, from a therapist level. And I really think that transparency builds trust. In addition to that, I think, as a profession, like we are all in this together. We're all fighting the same battles. We're all trying to be creative in the areas that we can be creative. And so, reach out to colleagues so we can share stories. But I really think that now is the time that we have to find unique ways that we are compensating our therapists to be competitive in the market. I
think my advice would be to just jump in and try something new, but don't feel like you have to change everything across the whole company. You can try something new and take it slow at the same time. We started a pilot program with half a dozen people and ran that pilot for almost a year before we decided what to do next. So you don't have to make wholesale change across the whole organization. And that allows you to, kind of dial things in before you make those big changes. Along with that, and Jason kind of alluded to this earlier, but I would also give the advice to not underestimate how risk averse a lot of your staff therapists may be. Like they just aren't going to necessarily buy into a high risk, high reward program right away. And you're going to need to give them other options and stability, and then do a lot of work to show them how they can walk down that path if they want to.
One of the other things that I think we would all agree as an industry is that we also have historically shielded therapists from a lot of the information as it relates to metrics in terms of what it looks like to run a practice. And that's probably debatable why we have done that, but I think many of us would agree that that's something we've just not wanted to make available to therapists. Perhaps we felt they would not like to see the ugly underbelly of what it looks like to run a PT practice, perhaps in certain circumstances. But what we have found is that therapists are very smart people. And if you are willing to invite them in to what it looks like to run a practice and to show them some of those metrics, they can and will start to make decisions based on the information they have. A perfect example is a revenue share model. Let's say you're interested in introducing a revenue share model to your therapist. If you're going to introduce a revenue share model, you have to be comfortable showing them the revenue. Otherwise, it's all smoke and mirrors. They can't actually see what the model looks like. A lot of owners are uncomfortable showing a therapist you generated $7,000 last week because the concern is, what will the therapist say? We know what they will say. Why don't I get paid all $7,000? Rather than avoiding that approach, it's an educational coaching opportunity. Here's why. Here are the list of GL codes. We don't have to show them the dollar amounts, but the categories themselves that we're utilizing to pay to run the business based on the revenue that you're generating. In my experience, once you show therapists that information, in every case, they look at that and say, oh, that makes sense. And then they can wrap their heads around it. So rather than avoiding giving therapists the information, it's high time as a profession that we invite them in to that information and trust that they can handle it, arm them with the information, and then let them make decisions along the way, certainly as it relates to the compensation models that they're selecting. I want to throw us a curveball and give us one new question that we did not talk about in advance, but I think it's going to be a good question, and it looks like we have another minute or two to do it. What would you do differently if you go back to the change that you made, thinking back to when you actually initially made the change? What mistake did you make, or what would you have done differently knowing now what you know? Larissa, let's start with you.
We went all in with our therapist. So I think, like Jason has spoke about, doing a pilot would have been a great example for us to maybe dip our toes in and just experience that and go from there. I would definitely suggest that for anyone that's new to the area or new and is contemplating making that decision. I would say another one was making sure that our clinic directors or managers understood the model at a higher level. We have spent time in the last couple of years really educating them to understand it so they can speak to it better with their therapists, because our clinic directors are not on it. And so there was kind of a gap when it came to recruiting or retention and speaking to the model at a high level to help their therapists. Our administrative team knew it at a high level, but we kind of missed the gap there with our clinic directors not being on it, fully understanding it, and being able to support it and speak to it at a high level.
How about you, Jason?
The main thing for me would be I would have given people more choices sooner. When we started our program in 2019, we had one option on prompt compensation that was different than salaried or hourly. And we didn't add more options until about a year ago. And not even a year ago, 10 months ago. And in that time, a year ago, we had just under 20% of our people participating voluntarily in the prompt compensation model. And we now have over 30% participating. And I attribute that to two things. One is we have more options for them. And two, we're doing a better job, as Larissa mentioned, we're doing a better job educating people about it, getting it out there, putting the information in front of them. And looking back, I would have liked to have done those two things sooner.
I think that's important because the key is for us to jump in and do something differently, but it doesn't mean we're going to hit it out of the park with our first try. And we've worked with both of you to change your approach over time. And that's critical. You're not going to get it right the first time. If you decide to go this route, and you make a change, the fact that you're making a change and offering options is a step in the right direction. It's very likely that if that model, that approach, those models work well now, 2 years from now, you probably will have to adjust those. And again, as long as you're transparent with your providers about that, they will be perfectly fine with that if you're inviting them into why you're making that change. Let me close with just a few other recommendations for you to think about if you're deciding to go in this direction. Number one is a concept that we call a grace period. The idea is that you build out new models, give your therapists visibility into those models, but don't immediately start paying them according to those models, and don't require them to immediately make a decision. We're typically seeing grace periods now anywhere from 3 to 12 months. With an early enrollment option, that's always an option as well. The other tip that we would give you is they have to have historic data already that they can see, that they can run through their models. And that's partly what our system does, what prompt compensation does. It gives them the ability to essentially shop for a compensation model using their own data. Typically, we recommend going back at least 6 months, but honestly, the farther back, the better. Because if I'm a therapist and I'm looking at these models and I'm concerned about snow days, deductibles resetting, periods of lower volumes, if I can look back in time at my own data where those realities are captured, I can get a sense of whether that's something I actually need to be concerned about, or maybe I don't. Because at the end of the year, what really matters to me as a therapist is, what does my W-2 show? What were my total earnings on that year? Even if there is some variability throughout the year, ultimately I want to see an increase. So those are some tips and recommendations that we would give you. In closing, let me say this. We'll pass out the handouts so all of you can see the objective data and have access to that QR code so you can hear directly from staff therapists across the country about their experience with this approach. If you have additional questions and you'd like to chat a little bit more about this, Jason and Larissa have been kind enough to make themselves available for a few minutes after. I myself have to run off to another meeting right now, but shortly after that, we'll be at the booth. If you'd like to get some more information, you can make your way over there, and we'll be happy to do that. And with that, thank you for joining us. We're glad that you chose to do so.